Hi, today we're going to do Kal Academy Array Problem Set 2, number 10. So the problem says, return the elements of an array in decreasing frequency. If two numbers have same frequency, then print the one which came first. So if we're given this big old array of integers, 2, 5, 2, 6, negative 1, this big number, 5, 8, 8, 8, we should get 8, 8, 8, because there's 3 8s, that's the most that occur. Then 2 2s, and then 2 5s. The 2 came before the 5, so 2 came first. Then we have 6, which has a frequency of 1, so that comes first. We have negative 1, has 1 frequency, that comes second. And then that big number has 1 frequency, so that comes last. We're going to do this in a time complexity of O(n) squared with a space complexity of O(n). Alright, so first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to create a hash called frequency. And this is where we're going to store all of our counts and as well as our indices for each element. So we're going to loop over the given array. And we're going to call the element L, and we're going to say if the element is not inside of the frequency hash, then we are going to add it. We're going to say frequency at L is going to be equal to an array where we set the first count to 1, and then set the first element to the index of the given element. Else, you're just going to add the 0th element, say plus equals 1. Okay, so then that should fill this frequency object up with all the counts, so it should look a little bit something like this. Like we'll have an 8, it'll have an array with a count of 3, and where its first index occurred, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. That's just an example of how frequency would look with the number 8 in it. Okay, so once we have that, what we're going to do here, part of this is we are going to also be requiring a library called underscore. Underscore gives us a nice access to lots of functionality that the native JavaScript functions don't have. One being that we can map over objects. With the built-in one, we can't do that, but with this one we can. So we're going to map over each val and each key, and we are going to essentially store them in tuples. We're going to store the key value pairs in these tuples inside of a new array. So when we do this, we map through frequency and we store it as these subarrays. It should look something like, for instance, using 8 again, we'd have an 8 here, and then we'd have for our value 3 and a 7. So this is an example of continuing building off this example of how now the mapping of the frequency object would look like. Okay, so now once we do that, what's the next step? So now we want to sort it. So now we want to say frequency dot sort. We're going to say A, comma B. This is a built-in function, JavaScript function, and we're going to say B. This is going to get a little tricky now. We're going to say B at the 1th position. So meaning if we're given this, or this as the element we're looking at, we're going to look at the 1th element in that, which is the value property, and at the 0th item, which is the frequency. So what we're doing right now is we're going to sort it by frequency first. Then we're going to sort it by index. So this should bring back to us the array, all the arrays sorted in their nice sorted order. Alright, so after we do that, what's the next step? So now we basically want to go through and change the ordering based off of their indices. So we're going to create these two different variables called J and K. J is going to represent the current element we're iterating over, and K is going to represent the next element adjacent to it, adjacent to the current element. That way we can do a accurate comparison if the two elements have the same frequency. If so, let's look at their indices and swap them if need be. So, okay, now we're going to say I'll say current val, and that's going to be equal to the frequency at the J position, at the 1th position, at the 0th position. So that's going to be looking at it's going to be looking at the current frequency, basically. And then we're going to look at the next val, and that's going to be the same thing, but for the kth position. And then we're also going to look at the index, current index, and we're going to look at the next index. That's the 1th position, with the next index, which is the kth position, at the 1th position, at the 1th position, which is just meaning looking there. So this is going to be the current index. This is going to be the current val. That's all we're saying. This big old jumbled up thing is that's all we're saying. So if the current val is equal to the next val, so meaning they have the same frequency, and the current current index is greater than the next index, then we know that the current element is in the wrong position. It should come after it. Since it has a greater index value, that means it came later in the array. It should therefore be switched. So then we're going to have a helper function somewhere. You don't need to worry about how that looks. Just know that the helper function is going to swap the two positions to two elements. So we're going to pass in J and K, and it'll swap them inside of the array, inside of this the frequency array that we've created here. It'll swap their positions. All right, so then after we do that, should be done with that loop. The last loop we're going to do is where we're actually going to build out the how the final array should look like. So we're going to say L, well, L is less than the frequency length. We're going to increment L, and we are going to say frequency is going to be equal to the freq, the L position, the 1th position, at the 0th position. Again, that just means that guy. That's all we're targeting. And then we're going to have a value, which is just going to be the it's going to be the actual key name. So the L at the 0th position, which is just pointing to this guy. That's what the value is going to represent in this case down here. So frequency and value is what this means down here. So what we're going to say is, okay, at the L position, at the 0th position, so at this position, let's reassign it to be an array with that's taking in the frequency, and we're going to fill that with the value. So the value, the frequency is 3. So we're saying let's allocate 3 spaces in a new array and fill it with a copy called 8. So we're going to make 3 copies of 8. We're going to assign it to the 0th position. So when we do that, after we've assigned it, we want to then pop out this array here. So essentially what happens in this logic here is we're going to pop this out, and in this, the place of here, we're going to insert 3 8s, and it's going to look like that. Now we have the correct number of values. The problem here now is we have this nested array business. We don't want that. So we're going to call on another one of our handy dandy little functions from underscore, and it's called flatten. And flatten will then go through the array and literally concat all the arrays together and flatten them down to a single array. And that should then look like this right here. And that is how you solve this problem. Thank you.